Hello, my name is Holly Dalton, and I'm the Early Math and Early Literacy Assessment Specialist at the Oregon Department of Education. This is the Kindergarten Assessment, Early Literacy, and Early Math training module for the 2019-20 school year. This module is required for all district and school test coordinators as well as test administrators. The purposes of the kindergarten assessment are twofold. The first is to provide local and statewide information that gives families, schools, communities, and state level policymakers a snapshot of the social, self regulatory, and academic skills of incoming kindergartners. The second is to provide a consistent statewide tool for identifying systemic opportunity gaps, determining early learning resource allocation to best support students in need, and to measure improvement over time. The kindergarten assessment looks at a set of specific skills and should not be used as a gatekeeper for students entering kindergarten. It should not be used as a sole means for placement in programs or classrooms, and the assessment was not designed to measure what students learn in kindergarten, and it is aligned to early learning and Common Core state standards. All districts in Oregon are required to administer the kindergarten assessment. This means that all public schools, including public charter schools, are required to administer the kindergarten assessment. District test coordinators are responsible for ensuring that any of the publicly sponsored charter schools that are associated with the district are administering all statewide required assessments. All students, including children with disabilities, are required to participate in the kindergarten assessment. There are no domain exemptions allowed. District test coordinators will need to work with district staff to ensure that proper training and rules and procedures are carried out. The annual training may be conducted by the district test coordinator and or the school test coordinator, who must be trained by the district test coordinator. Districts set local windows based upon their individual start dates. Local test windows last 6 weeks only. The window must open by the first day of school. The window could open earlier if students are assessed during something like a ramp up to kindergarten program. The early math and early literacy must be assessed within the first 3 weeks of the test window to ensure comparability of students. This assessment was not designed to measure what students learn in kindergarten. We need to capture the most accurate picture of what students know when they enter kindergarten, and TAs must not wait until the end of the window to administer these measures. Assessing early math and early literacy later in the window results in inaccuracies and compromises the comparability of scores. Accessibility. Accessibility supports provide equitable access to all students, and they do not compromise the learning expectations, construct, grade level standard, and or measured outcome of the assessment, and only approved supports found in the Oregon Kindergarten Assessment are allowed during the assessment. If you can't find it in the Kindergarten Assessment Manual, it's not allowable. Accessibility supports are found in the CAM. They guide the selection of universal tools, designated supports, and accommodations. They're intended to reduce or eliminate the effects of a student's learning challenges, and they're used by general education teachers, teachers of English learners, special education teachers, test administrators, and district level assessment staff. There are 3 types of support. The first is universal tools, and they're available to all students based upon student preference and selection. The second is designated supports, which are accessible features available for use by any student for whom the need has been indicated by an educator or team of educators. And the last are accommodations. Those are changes in procedures or materials that increase equitable access during assessment. These must be documented on a student's IEP or individual education plan or Section 504 plan. While ODE recommends the documentation of accessibility supports, particularly designated supports for all students, to ensure staff provide these during the statewide kindergarten assessment, accommodations must be documented on a student's individual education plan, IEP, or 504 plan. For students on an IEP, the following are options available to the IEP team for documenting any of all or the universal tools and or designated supports on the IEP. Consideration of special factors, present level of academic and functional performance, participation in assessments, or supplementary aids and services. Accessibility supports do not compromise the learning expectations, construct, or grade level standard and or measure outcome of the assessment. Only supports approved by the accessibility panel are allowed during the assessment. Accessibility supports must be identified and implemented during classroom instruction prior to the student's participation in the state assessment. In order to provide a valid and reliable administration of the Oregon Kindergarten Assessment, it is recommended that the school or district team, including the parent or guardian, gather any information about the student prior to administering the assessment. For all students, information gathered through the school or district-based protocols, for example, registration or enrollment forms, entrance interviews, kindergarten roundup or intake may be useful. For students with disabilities, additional information may be found on their IEP or 504 plan. All supports must be set up prior to the assessment. We understand that this might be one of the first times that these supports are being used and are asking you to use your best judgment around implementing supports for students. Questions to consider. A designated language support should be provided for any student who it is determined would be better served with a verbatim script read aloud in their preferred language. A Spanish translation is provided by the Oregon Department of Education in Early Literacy and Early Math. A trained staff member who is bilingual in Spanish or any other language in which the district provides translation must administer the assessment to students using the designated language support. Preparing for early literacy and early math. Before the students arrive, you're going to review the Kindergarten Assessment Manual, or the CAM, and the Oregon Kindergarten Assessment Materials. You're going to gather all student information. You're going to prepare for allowable language supports as needed and prepare for accommodations per the IEP or 504 plan, and then you're going to gather those materials. The skills on the 2019-20 Kindergarten Assessment will include English uppercase and lowercase letter name recognition. Students will have the opportunity to identify all 26 uppercase and lowercase letters. It will also include English letter sound recognition, where students have the opportunity to identify all 26 letter sounds in letter pairs, one uppercase and one lowercase letter next to each other. For example, an uppercase B and a lowercase b. For math, students will be presented with 16 math items, some of which were revised for the 2019-20 administration, and the math items will continue to be cycled in and out on an annual basis. For the 2019-20 school year, there's only one form of the assessment materials. For the early literacy and early math assessment, you will need the following: the operational assessor booklet, the operational student booklet, and the operational score sheet. The operational assessor booklet is green, and the operational student booklet is yellow. The following information needs to be filled out for every student. Districts may create labels that contain the exact information if that is easier for you. TAs must indicate if the student is receiving special education and or is an English language learner. If the student's home language is other than English, it must be indicated on the score sheet. These will help identify accessibility supports for the students. Also, the TA needs to list which supports are being used, including accessibility supports. TAs must include their first and last names for future reference by the district. For each measure, including upper and lowercase letters, letter sounds, and early math, an attempt and administrative code must be used. A Y attempt code is used when the student is given the opportunity to test. This does not mean that they completed the assessment. A no or N attempt code is given when the assessment was not presented at all. In most cases, When using a test attempt code of Y, you will use an administrative code of 0, meaning that no special circumstances were applied to the assessment. A code of 3 should only be used in the rare circumstance that a student's IEP would necessitate changing the kindergarten assessment for that student. An example of this would be to change the answer choices from 3 to 2 on the early math measure. This would be predetermined by the IEP team, and the students would have an alternative form of the assessment. This would also result in not counting towards participation. This code should not be used to excuse students with disabilities from the kindergarten assessment. That's a violation of IDEA law. A code 4 is used if a student receives less than 50% of their instruction at their home school or is a foreign exchange student. A code 7 is to be determined by ODE only. This indicates an invalidation of the assessment due to an impropriety. A C is used in cases where the student was presented with the opportunity to test but refuses to participate by hiding under the desk or pushing the book away. Administrative codes for N. An administrative code of 1 indicates that the student was absent over the course of the entire assessment. A code 4 is used if a student who does not receive the primary instruction at the school, that's less than 50% of the instruction, is a foreign exchange student or a student who resides or attends school outside of the state. A code 5 is used if a student who is no longer enrolled in the district, a student who moved before the assessment could be administered, or a student who moved to the district during the last 3 weeks of testing administration. A code 6 is used due to significant medical emergency throughout the entire testing window. A code 7 is for use by ODE and results in a test impropriety. A code 9 is used under OAR 581-022-1910, and that permits parents to request exemption based on disability or religion only. A code D is used in case where a student is repeating kindergarten and the district decides not to assess them in that subject. The kindergarten assessment differs from our other statewide assessments in that it is a one-on-one assessment. The relationship with the test administrator affects the interaction with the assessment. Please remember that for most students, this is their first experience with assessment, and we want to make the student feel as comfortable as possible. This means that you should be as positive as possible. Please seat yourself next to the student and begin by introducing yourself and asking questions like, "How are you today?" Early literacy. English uppercase and lowercase letter name recognition are direct assessments. Students are presented with a sample item for each of the measures, and students will be presented with 2 separate 26-item grids, one uppercase and one lowercase, and will be asked to identify as many uppercase and lowercase letters as they can out of 26. Students will be given approximately 5 seconds between each letter. Note that some students will require additional processing time between letters. Spanish instructions are provided for students as a designated support. This designated support should be determined in the same way as other statewide assessments. Assessor instructions may be translated into other languages depending on need. All translated instructions are delivered by a bilingual assessor. The directions are located in the assessor booklet and must be read verbatim. Any deviation from the instructions would be considered a testing impropriety. The test administrator should not provide feedback on sample items. You are allowed to say the phrases listed here, such as good effort, keep trying, next letter, do your best, and thank you. A book refers to the materials. A pointing finger indicates when the TA needs to demonstrate or show something to the student, and the speaker indicates when the TA is required to give verbal directions. Detailed instructions are found in the kindergarten assessment assessor booklet. English letter name recognition scoring. If the student is correct, you're not going to mark the letter, you're going to leave blank and mark as correct. If the student self-corrects, you're going to mark SC above the letter and count as correct. If the student says the incorrect letter name, you're going to slash through the letter and mark as incorrect. And if the student does not name a letter, you're going to slash through the letter and mark as incorrect. You're going to record an attempt code on the operational score sheet of Y or N, administrative code, which is provided on the score sheet, the number correct, which is the number of correct letters, and the assessment administrative date, which is the date the assessment was administered. Here is an example of what a completed English uppercase letter name recognition would look like. If a student is unable to name a letter after 5 seconds, please direct the student to move on to the next letter. If the student is unable to name any of the letters in the first row, you're going to say, can you tell me the name of any of the letters in the chart? If the student provides the letter sound instead of the letter name, say, please tell me the name of that letter. If the student provides the letter name in a language other than English, say, please tell me the name of the letter in English. If the student loses his or her place, you may direct the student to the correct letter. It is allowable for the TA to point to each letter in the chart. English letter sound recognition is a direct, untimed assessment that measures English letter sound recognition. Students are presented with a sample item for each of the measures. Students will be presented with a 26-item grid of letter pairs, a capital and a lowercase letter that are next to each other. Students will be asked to identify as many sounds as they can out of 26. Students will be given approximately 5 seconds between each letter, noting again that some students will require additional processing time between letter sounds, and Spanish instructions are provided for students as a designated support. If the student is correct, you're not going to mark the letter, you're going to leave blank and mark as correct. If a student self-corrects, you're going to mark self-correct, SC, above the letter and count as correct. If the student says the incorrect letter sound, you're going to slash through the letter and mark as incorrect. If the student does not say a sound or makes the incorrect sound, you're going to slash through the letter and mark as incorrect. If a student says a long or short vowel sound, both are correct. If a student says a hard or soft consonant sound for C or G, both are correct, such as C as in cat, or C as in face, or G as in go, or G as in barge. If the student is unable to accurately articulate the sound due to a speech disorder, etc., but demonstrates knowledge of the sound, you're going to count as correct. You're going to record a Y or an N for the attempt code, the administrative code, which is provided on the score sheet, the number correct, it's a number of correct letter sounds, and the date the measure was administered. The use of this 2017-18 grid is for demonstration and training purposes. The 2019-20 grids will be scored the same way, but the letter arrangement will be different. And here's an example of what that would look like. If a student is unable to name a letter sound after 5 seconds, you're going to please direct the student to move on to the next letter pair. If the student is unable to name any of the letter sounds in the first row, say, can you tell me the names of any sounds of the letter pairs in the chart? If the student provides the letter name instead of the letter sound, say, please tell me the sound of that letter pair. If the student provides the letter sound in a language other than English, say, please tell me the sound of the letter pair in English. If a student loses his or her place, you're going to direct the student to the correct letter. The TA is allowed to point to each letter in the chart. For the past 3 years, the Oregon Department of Education has provided interpretive guidance for the early literacy measures. The scores fall into 3 categories: developing, approaching, or demonstrating and above. For each measure, there are specific achievement level descriptors. Early math. The student booklet has 1 item per page. There are 2 sample items and 16 assessment items. This assessment is not timed. You can plan on 6 to 9 minutes of administrative time for each student, and Spanish instructions are provided for students as a designated support and may be translated into other languages based upon student need. Detailed instructions are located in the operational accessor booklet. You're going to read the directions verbatim. It is always allowable to say the following phrases: good effort, keep trying, next, do your best, and thank you, in any language. The student responses will be recorded on the Verbal or pointed responses are acceptable. If a student verbalizes their answer and doesn't point, the verbalized answer is accepted. If a student verbalizes an answer but points to a different answer, prompt the student 1 time to point to their final answer, and the pointed answer is accepted. If a student verbalizes in a language in which the directions were given in English or both, bilingual answers are acceptable. At this time, the Oregon Department of Education does not have interpretive guidance around the early math measure. As I said, it's always acceptable to use the following phrases and provide encouragement. Your regional ESD partners are a wealth of knowledge. They are Amy Rockwell, Karen Brown-Smith, and Joe Doherty. If you have any questions related to the assessment, policy, and procedure, you're going to contact me, Holly Dalton. If you have any questions about your KA data submission that your district test coordinator can't answer, please contact your ESD, regional ESD partner, or Elise Bean. If you're having difficulties with the ODE district webpage, please contact the ODE help desk.